What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Hollywood Already Did It presents Marvel Pair-Ups, the history of Marvel's movies. As always, I'm your host, Blake Schultz, and with me is Jamie Jirac.
Hello.
And Terrence Tatum.
Hello, everyone.
And if you're joining us for the first time, this is a spin-off of our main Hollywood Already Did It podcast, where we are pairing up every Disney Plus show with some type of movie or television show and a little history of how it's done. With the What If series, we're talking about each What If episode and going through Marvel's cinematic history from 1944 to probably around 2008 is when I think we'll be done with this mini series, because then you know it after the
You're caught up.
There's nothing left to say about Iron Man. That beach already has a lot of sand. We don't need to bring more of it to it. But of course, this week we are talking about some dark What If episodes and Marvel's first real cinematic triumph in Blade, their first try after Howard the Duck, so many years later. But first, let's talk about What If episode 4. What if Doctor Strange lost his heart in the accident instead of his hands? Terrence, what did you think of this episode?
My God, this is a sad episode. I watched it twice, so apparently there's something wrong with me. Like I want to feel broken. But no, this was a really good episode. It was very depressing, but kind of remind me. A lot of these episodes start to feel like Black Mirror episodes a little bit, but this is definitely what this sort of feels like. And I was like, oh, this is terrible. And but I did love that the impetus of it is sort of showing that like these folks are going to end up within these powers or in these superhero world no matter what. How they get there sort of operates and how they react and interact once they have those powers. And to see Strange like, yeah, he's still going through the process of getting all of these powers and going through this stuff and meeting the Ancient One and all that stuff, but then his heart is broken. And so the second he can think about it, like, I know everything that I need to know to make this work enough, I'm going to go ahead and switch it out. I found that fascinating. I gives you a little bit more into the character study of that. It also sort of points at, like, I know people are sort of freaking out with the Spider-Man Strange and how he doesn't quite seem like he would be the one to be like, yeah, cool, let's go ahead and do this random thing for you, kid. This could
no, I'm glad you said that, because in the same week that we were like, Doctor Strange would never, we found out that he would literally destroy existence if he could try to save somebody.
Yeah.
So maybe the dude who was trying to pick out medical cases while speeding down a highway and passing people on a windy road is the same guy who would be like, we can make people forget.
I do love that we still kept that part. Like, so he's still dick enough to like, I'm going to avoid this truck and I'm such in a rush, even with the woman that I care about in here.
Terrence, not only does he do that, the first time he goes back in time, he doesn't just like take a cab or slow down. He tries to pass the truck again. He has lost the love of his life to this, goes back in time and is like, this time I'm going to pass the truck with my blinker
If I put my blinker on, it will be fine.
Like, my dude, I think you missed the whole thing.
Yeah, but I know I enjoyed this one. They're starting to improve as they go along, I think, for me.
Interesting. I didn't like the first half because, we just watched About Time for our Loki podcast, and I was like, we just watched Rachel McAdams do this exact same thing in About
Literally
Time.
The same thing.
Like, I was like, and I feel like just like the repeating thing, like it just felt like a thing I've seen a million times. But I loved the second half when he went crazy. I love that it ended with him losing and destroying the world. I like how they're willing to go really dark with it. So I was the second half reeled me in. The first half I was like, come on, give Rachel McAdams literally anything else to do on this earth. Also, the whole fixed point thing is, I think, a little weird to me because it's a fixed point in this one alternate reality. Wouldn't a fixed point be in any multiple universes? It's a weird
choice. As soon as they said it, I was like, I call bullshit, but okay.
Well, we're also changing time travel rules now. We're just going back, but there's not two Doctor Stranges there. We're not doing it with in-game rules. But yeah, that was my other, like, we're now in some Doctor Who timey-wimey shit of just like, each one is different, which I'm like, kind of like, whatever, fine, I'll go along on this ride. I'm not going to, as they said in Looper, I'm not going to sit here with matchsticks and figure it out.
Yeah.
But I agree with pretty much everything you guys are saying. I I'm seeing a lot of posts that this is a lot of people's favorite one so far. And I get that it is like the darkest one, the roughest one, the saddest one. And we don't get a lot of stories where our heroes lose in the MCU. And I think that's a fun change. But this was not my favorite one. It might be my, even like lower. This might be my least favorite of the four. And I think part of it is that Jamie kind of hit it on the head. Like half of this episode was just like, how many times do I have to watch Rachel McAdams die? I get it. It's a fixed point in time. You've got 40 minutes to do this. I don't need to spend, and some of it was like, it shouldn't have been funny, but it was. Like when she just dies dancing with him and he's like, no, I just started laughing. It does start,
like, I have a sixth sense of humor too. And after a couple of repetitions, like when they're eating at the diner and the guy just comes in with the gun, I was like, of course he's going to get shot. Like I started getting to that point, like, yeah, oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah, like it's like, yeah, we got it. He can't avoid it. But I also kind of agreed with Jamie. And I really thought that like, if it's a fixed point, shouldn't that be across every multiverse? But maybe what it's saying is there are fixed points in time travel and they are different. Like somebody always has to become a super soldier, be it Captain Carter or Captain America. Someone always has to become a Star-Lord, be it T'Challa or Star-Lord. Thank you. You know, Chris. Peter Quill. Thank you.
It kind of reminded me of again, about times that the fixed point was once you had a kid, you could not go back beyond that. That's sort of what happens here, but there's no real impetus of why this is the fixed point. Like there's like, we're just saying that this is the spot.
But you know, the animation in this one though was gorgeous. For all of my like story issues with it, when we were starting to like suck away some of these creatures and the soul just opening his mouth, once he starts fighting the other Doctor Strange, that's when I really was like, okay, now we're getting into this horror, sorcery, this like Scott Derrickson feels like he's kind of here, Sam Raimi stuff that I'm like, this is what's kind of missing in Marvel movies right now that we used to do, that we're about to talk about a lot more. But, you know, I feel like Spider-Man 2 had like the Doc Ock scene, and even like Green Goblin had some horror beats, and the X-Men movies used to have these like dark, weird scenes. And it's something that I feel like we've lost. And seeing it here, I was like, oh, we're coming back. We're going to start kind of putting some like scarier stuff back in these movies.
Yeah, definitely. Once the thing started absorbing Strange and like it went into him, I was like, oh, I can't wait to this live action thing because I feel like Sam Raimi's going to have a ball.
Well, and we're starting to see it slip in the other TV shows too, right? That jump cut of Vision with his stone ripped out in episode 3 of WandaVision was a big like, oh, moment. Like we've sort of had it there, but I feel like it has oddly been on the Disney Plus side of things. And I'm like, I'm ready for this like horror superhero genre to come roaring back. But yeah, everything else, I liked him talking to the Watcher at the end. I thought that was cool. I don't know why I still expect any of these episodes to build into something bigger. A part of me was like, oh, this is going to be like, he's going to learn about a universe where it's still a fixed point, but his hands get hurt and he's going to come for our Doctor Strange and we're going to build this villain. But no, we just goes to like a Looney Tunes cartoon. But watching him blast everything, this giant Cthulhu monster he becomes at the end, I was like, this is all great. We spent so long killing this poor woman.
20 minutes of a 48-minute episode just murdering this woman.
Once we got to the dope stuff, I was like, but now it's like very quick. Like, show me more of this weird, strange monster. Show me more of the weird bugs. We see the tentacle monster again. Are we building to something?
I feel like that's happened throughout all of this series, though. It's like all of these episodes are just each time they feel like, oh, you're about 15 minutes too short, or you're about 20 minutes too short because you spent so much time retreading stuff that we, the audience, we're in this. We know this stuff by now. Like, you don't have to beat us over the face with this at a point.
I think that's why I
literally have done it one more time and like, she keeps dying. Cool, I buy it.
I just need 3 rule of threes.
Yeah.
She dies again. Third time, Ancient One can show up and go, it's a fixed point. He can try it one more time then and fail, and then start scaring me. Then I got it. But I think that's why I liked the Ant-Man one so much, is that one was more just like, people are dying, there's a serial killer and a mystery. You know everything else. Don't worry about it. But I'm excited to see what we keep doing. I like seeing us start to deal with darker themes that we probably won't deal with in the movies. I don't think there's ever going to be a Marvel cinematic tentpole summer opening that's like, and then the world ended. And don't say Infinity War because it doesn't count. We knew there was a fourth one coming. We knew it was going to be fine. That's very different, but that's the closest we've gotten to. And I'm like, yeah, let's keep doing that. Give me a sadder, darker, weirder ending. But
I love that ending for Infinity War. But we all did know what was happening, but it was great. Even though I knew what was happening as an adult, but seeing that through the eyes of people who didn't, like kids who didn't, they were bawling. I'm like, that's the feeling that they want. That's it. So
I don't know. Maybe I'm just cynical and I'm like, movies end happy. Like if it ends sad, there's going to be another one. We all knew
Empire
that
Strikes
Return
Back.
of the Jedi was coming.
Yeah.
Like it's fine. This is a money-making machine,
we're not stopping this. Black Panther and Spider-Man just came out. They're not killing both of them.
Do you know how many toys they can make if they pretend he's dead and then give him a new costume? Have you seen the No Way Home toys? He's in like 7 different outfits. It's stupid. We are undoing everything Sam Raimi did. That man was like, you got 2 suits in 3 movies. Toy Biz hated him. Yeah. Kevin's behind the wheel. Marvel Legends, we get like 8 waves of nonsense. Speaking of all the things that I just mentioned, horror, some action figure history, and obviously a little bit of Spider-Man, we are, as I said, here today to talk about Marvel's return to the cinematic screen. If you've been watching us, you know that in 1944, Captain America came out as a serial. We then had almost decades of television from Universal with Incredible Hulk, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man, so many things that didn't work and only one that really did. And of course, the theatrical release of Howard the Duck. For 20 years, nothing happened until one beautiful summer when we had the release of Blade in the late 90s to come out and fix everything. So let's get into this. It is the 90s for everybody. I think really to understand this history, because in terms of movie making, it's very straightforward. There was a script, it was in development, it went through some stars, it got made. But to really get why this is important, you have to understand where Marvel was in the late 90s. We're a few years before X-Men, before Spider-Man, we're a decade out from the MCU. They're declaring bankruptcy. Marvel Entertainment Group has basically dissipated. It is now rebuilt as Marvel Enterprises in 1997 by Ike Perlmutter, who will go on to be a bad person, and Avi Arad, who will go on to make a lot of Spider-Man spinoffs, and be a perfectly fine person.
Yeah.
They were co-owning Toy Biz at the time, and they needed the Marvel brand to get back up to sell toys. And the best way to get toys sold is to have movies. And there were not any movies coming out. Everybody had grown out of the cartoon show. X-Men was, I think, off the air. Spider-Man was about to be off the air. We were sort of done. There was no real brand awareness out. And the attempt to get that brand back up with Heroes Reborn, a controversial 90s storyline with Iron Man, Cap, Thor, failed. It did not bring in new readers. It brought about controversy. No one was reading it. Comic books in general starting to dip. So then enters Marvel Knights. We are now at the bottom of the barrel, as they used to say. Daredevil, Punisher, Blade. I think they described them as the scraps. They had the idea to lease them off to an independent company, Event Comics, to make a run called Marvel Knights. The idea being, if I was 10 when I read Spider-Man, now I'm 20 and I want something a little more mature. And that worked.
Yes.
And it worked well enough that it accidentally coincided with the release of Blade, a movie that they had been trying to make since 1992. LL Cool J was going to be in it. Lawrence Fishburne was going to be in it. Denzel was going to be in it. And of course, Wesley Snipes defined the role, changing how he would look in the comics the same way that Sam Jackson and Robert Downey Jr. would do in a few more years, completely making it synonymous with who they were. Originally, New Line wanted to make it a parody. Then they wondered if a white person could be in it. Luckily, Goyer, Snipes, and their director all fought back hard for some licensing, some creative freedoms. They wanted to make their Blade movie, and as we talked about last week, keep it close to the character, which they did and they didn't. You change some things here and there. The movie was made deliberately to stand out. It's the late 90s. We're a year away from The Matrix. We're about to have Underworld. And in comes Blade with his long trench coat, his dark movies. We're not doing the Tim Burton thing. We're not doing the Christopher Reeves thing. We are grounded, a word that they think has no meaning in Hollywood, but we can get as close as we can here. It's darker, it's scarier, it's ominous. We're trying to combine the 90s action hero with old horror romance from old Universal movie monsters. And we welded it in to make something that really, the iconography of the movie stands out still today. It's an R-rated movie. It makes a ton of money. And we're in. It did way more for Goyer, who wrote it, who would go on to make pretty much every superhero movie you know.
Yeah.
The director Norrington would go on to make League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and then retire.
And then he was done. That was
Sean Connery, both. We're out.
You know what?
Yep.
We gotta get around.
Hollywood.
We're out.
It's that movie. We could do a whole thing on that movie. And that, I mean, that's pretty much Blade. It showed up. I mean, that style then, that action, that weird gothic look, this Evanescence music video brought to life, it became put in The Matrix. There was even bullet time before everything The Matrix gets credit for doing, Blade kind of did it first.
Yeah.
And then we had the 2000s and Underworld and Resident Evil, and we have since, maybe done it a little too much, but guys, I love this movie. Tell us about
so
Blade.
Good. This is only my second time seeing Blade, and I forgot how friggin' good it is. Like that opening, are you kidding me? The blood rain rave party.
One of the greatest things ever. Yeah.
Like it's so good, and like a lot of the CGI is like they're like, especially like the computer stuff is it's 1998. I wrote on Letterboxd, and I think this sums it up. Like I wrote Blade's impossible to rate, because it's a 4-star Marvel movie, a 4.5-star vampire movie, and a 5-star 1998 movie. And it's just, and Wesley Snipes is so good. It's gritty, it's fun. And I'm also excited to talk about the sequels, but before we do that, obviously Terrence has to talk about the first one.
So I saw this movie about 6 times in the theaters in the 98s. Like I kept going back to the theaters, so I was just enthralled by it. One,
how old were you?
Oh, I had to be 15, 16, I think, at that point. I was just like, there's a black dude on screen, he's beating ass. This is fantastic. And then I also really was into vampires at that point in time. So I was like, this is killing 2 birds with 1 stone. One, I had not seen anything like that. Like you said, that techno sequence was fantastic. But what was crazy about this movie that I think just hit me harder is that this took itself serious, whereas a lot of times when they did these Marvel films before, they're like, just take a couple of things that matter from it and we'll just do our own
You
thing.
didn't think Howard the Duck was serious?
And while they do change a couple of things, like they modernize both Blade and Deacon Frost, like they make Deacon significantly younger in the movie, and they kind of like hip Blade up, because in the comics he was more like Richard Round, like blaxploitation style, and then they counter switched the comics to match the films smartly, because that's all the audience knew. But the opening sequence of like the mom being pregnant, and after I was like, you're opening a movie? What is happening right now? And I was just enthralled. I never saw anything of this world sort of take itself serious. We get it now all the time, but at that point in time, which is why I always refer to Blade. People always say X-Men is the father and Spider-Man is Blade's the grandfather of all of these. Like this is where it all sort of started. They started getting that ball rolling. Like, oh, we can make this. It helps you that a lot of the audience was not aware of Blade, so they didn't even know this was a Marvel film until halfway through, and you start seeing the logo, like, wait, what? This is a comic book property? Oh,
well,
shit.
It's funny because, like, you're right. X-Men and Spider-Man get attested to the fathers of modern superhero movies, as if they're like, we talk this giant gap. Had it not been for Batman movies, that wouldn't have been any superhero movies. We would have this weird era that's just kind of like old serials trying to come back, and Batman's there sometimes, but Blade isn't just the father of superhero movies. It is R-rated action in a way that we hadn't done in years. Like Tarantino's not even, like Pulp Fiction's out, but he's not doing like Kill Bill stuff yet.
Right.
We've got so many other, this gothic horror, this horror action combination. It all sort of started here. A lot of even like anime influences that then The Matrix ran with. And you're right, like now we see it everywhere. And I feel like Blade is often just people being like, yeah, it was pretty good. I'm like, but it did everything for you. It's the Kang of these movies. It laid the path. Everyone else is just walking it.
Yeah.
It's insane that like there wasn't a comic book after it. You want to talk about like the only thing it didn't do was launch any toys. Like Toy Biz's next Marvel Legends line, which is what they're doing now in their 6-inch waves, were what they called Spider-Man Classics in 2002, which was just 6-inch versions of what they had been making years ago. So they didn't even get this toy brand awareness for another like 4 years.
Yeah. And what's crazy about this, because this is like, it was an R-rated thing. Toy, and they were sort of ignoring the Marvel thing because you don't see it on any of the posters. Marvel, you see New Line Cinema and sort of that's it. Marvel's like in production.
They weren't a brand at the time.
Right.
Would care
so toys didn't exist for this because it was more so for adults. They didn't even realize it, like, oh shit, we have an entire like cash cow that we're sitting on that we just ignored.
But that's the other thing, it changed, right? Because once Toy Biz started making those toys, those 6-inch Spider-Man Classics and Marvel Legends were geared towards adults who had played with their toys as kids. So Blade even kind of was like, start selling it to them.
Yeah.
The kids have had their time.
Yeah.
Let them watch SpongeBob in 1999. They'll enjoy that. The adults. Yeah, Jamie, you said you didn't even know it was a Marvel property for a while.
A long time. I couldn't tell you. You know what? I remember the first time I watched it, which was maybe like 4 or 5 years ago. I was still living in Chicago, so it had to be like 5 years ago. And it could have literally been, like Terrence said, in the credits. I may have known before that, but I don't know. I don't think I did. Because that movie, it's weird that movie kind of missed my radar because I'm a big vampire movie fan. I love vampire movies, so it's weird. And then I remember my friend Karp was like, you haven't seen Blade? And that is why this week when I watched Blade 2, I was like, how have I not? Literally nobody told me how good Blade 2 was.
Guillermo del Toro.
I didn't even know Guillermo del Toro directed it until yesterday when I watched it and his name popped up. I don't know how this escaped me, but Blade 2 is fucking rules.
It's badass. Yeah.
Oh my God, it's so good.
It is. Like, that was a movie that I remember when it came out day one. I was like, I'm in here. And then I found out at that point in time, I didn't really know who Guillermo del Toro was, but I was like, these creatures and stuff he's drawing, he's doing weird things with these vampires that open up their, what the fuck is this? This is amazing.
No, yeah, if Blade did stuff that we never saw, but then we would see forever, Blade 2 did stuff we never saw that we'll never see again. That is like, somewhere there's a what if universe where he went on to make a Hobbit movie. And I'm much happier in that universe. But Blade 2, that was the first one I saw in theaters. Like, I missed Blade 1, and Blade 2 was one of those ones that you're just like, we have to go to the rental store and get Blade.
There's more of this?
This was insane. Like, that movie just took you by the throat. It was crazy.
Yeah.
And it still holds up.
Like, it's very Suicide Squad-y.
Oh, so you put Ron Perlman and all that team together? And
it like literally puts a bomb on his head to like keep him in control. Also, I think it's very interesting that this came out a year before X2 because it's very similar to X2 in terms of the X-Men are teaming up with Magneto. Blade is teaming up with the vampires. And I'm like, X2 I saw a bunch of times in theaters. That was my jam at the time. And now I'm like, whoa, Blade 2 totally came before. Like it totally did things first. And
they did everything first, including making a bad third movie first. So go on with Blade 2.
They did.
No, that's true. Blade Trinity came out. But I just watched Trinity today. And I will say, while it is a significant drop in quality, it was still fun. I'd watch it again.
It's a good, like, I mean, the first two I will tell everybody to watch. The third one, I'm like, if you have time, sure. It's not one that I actively recommend. There are parts of it I like. Like, I'm a huge Parker Posey fan, so I will stand for her all the time. Ryan Reynolds is great in it, but it's clear that at that point, Wesley had sort of checked out. And it was like, he doesn't want to be here anymore.
And now all he wants to do is check back in.
Please let me in. I see how much money you guys are making. I would love to be a part of that. I got taxes to pay off.
He wanted off that. He wouldn't even open his eyes. They had to CGI his eyes back in. That is a real thing. Yeah. Open your eyes with these takes. I'm not opening my eyes.
Nope. No,
God,
yeah, the stuff that you hear about the set for Blade 3 is just fascinating. It's just
that should be a movie. That's the movie.
Didn't like Patton Oswalt, was it like in a stand-up show that he did it all, or like an interview or something? But like Patton Oswalt really spilled the beans on that one. I also forgot, like I knew Patton was in this because I've heard all those history stories. I was like, oh, because of course, when I think Patton, my brain goes Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because when doesn't my brain go Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.? I'm like, oh, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was not Patton's first Marvel property.
No. And then, I mean, you think about it, like, and then Blade 2, I mean, has like Donnie Yen and Norman Reedus in it. You're like, what? You guys are just breaking ground in these movies. This is nuts.
I was mad that Donnie Yen's death was like seen off screen because Donnie Yen's so famous now. And I'm like, really? That's how we're treating Donnie Yen?
No, it would be years before we'll give him an on-screen death. But yeah, that second one is, I don't even know what else to say about it. It's just so good. And then that third, that is really weird how there was this curse of threes for so long in not just superhero movies, but I feel like movies in general forever, like, and then that third one, ran out of ideas.
Goyer wrote all three of these, but he directed the third one. And that's when it was like, ooh, you should not direct ever again.
Well,
I'm trying to think of when is the third one the best? Toy Story?
Yes, Toy Story is one of
the Star Wars prequels.
Oh, that's
true.
Godfather, obviously.
Just kidding. And for the Marvel fans who have not seen Godfather.
Yeah.
The parallel universe where Jaws 3 was Jaws 3 People Zero, the John Hughes comedy scripts. Obviously, that would have been better than Jaws 1 and 2.
It's very rare that the third one.
The third one, usually it feels like a movie like for kids. Like when I think, like I loved Return of the Jedi so much as a kid, and I liked Back to the Future 3 as a kid, and it's like, and it feels like that's what happens with third movies often.
Like they
kind of feels that
because
way.
what happens,
those toys.
Because by the time you get to 3, you've basically become a box office success. Otherwise, you wouldn't have gotten to that point. So if 1 and 2 made a lot of money, like, cool, how can we make even more money? Let's make this broader to a broader audience. Let's get some hip, in the case of this one, let's get some hip white people in here and like, let's make it snappy and fun and like ignore Blade a little bit in this movie. You're like, well, wait a minute. We came for the cool black dude who was whooping everybody's ass.
Also, what is going on with Chris Christopherson? I don't understand his role in this third movie. Like they just like, first of all, it was confusing him in the second, like them bringing him back in the second movie was confusing, but it didn't really matter because it was like cool. But him in the third movie, I don't know what was happening there.
Yeah.
While we were a friend of mine and I were talking about who we would cast as Whistler in the new Blade, and my pick would be Cranston. And now I'm curious who you guys would pick.
Oh, Bryan Cranston would be nice.
Oh, for the new one, for the Mahershala
It's funny, he
Ali.
would be good because I didn't realize that Bryan was as old as he was, and actually it fits really well. Now that I think about it, that's a good one. That's
cool.
I know. I was proud of myself.
I mean, you can never go wrong with Bryan Cranston.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who else? I was about to be like, who played Zordon in the reboot? That was Bryan Cranston. I don't know. I'm very bad at these like fake casting. People are like, who? And I'm like, white people are all the same. I don't know.
I'm normally bad at it too. That's why I'm like, I have to tell you my idea. But I am excited for New Blade, mainly because we're gonna get vampires in the MCU.
I think vampires in the MCU, and I really dig Mahershala. Like now, here's where it gets weird. I don't know if Mahershala will be as action oriented as Wesley. Wesley was the badass at that point in time.
He was blading
in the 90s. He was blading his ass out. Like he coming off of Passenger 57, Demolition Man. He was doing all of his own fight sequences, so he was in his zone.
Well, I don't know how you're going to top, because like before we talk about this, I want to bring up one other thing with Blade that I've always thought is interesting is that it all the questions we had after of like, what about the black superhero and what about an R-rated superhero movie was answered by Blade before we made
ages
any
ago.
more of these.
Yeah, ages
and
ago.
whenever they were like, could Deadpool be R? I was like, but
you
did it 10 years ago. You did it.
I think we've kind of talked about this. Like, I feel like we as a culture have gotten like more like sensitive is the wrong word because but in terms of like we don't I think we talked about this especially with like sexual stuff, but I think that like we've gotten afraid to like go there. But I think that James Gunn just proved with the Suicide Squad that like just fucking go for it, man.
The R-rated action movie does not come out as often as it does, and when it does, it is either like a Tarantino or an existing IP. Like you really don't get a lot of like Die Hard ones or Alien or Aliens or Blade. This like
Blade
20th, it was 20th Century Fox that owned that for a long time.
Blade still existed in that decade of the 90s where they're like, we're going balls to the walls with these action films. We're going to go R-rated. We're going all the way in. And in the money, they started seeing that you can make a slightly better dollar if you make it PG-13, and then that's sort of what they have gone with, and so the R-rated stuff has started to die off, unfortunately, because I think we're in a world where we'll never find that True Lies or that Die Hard again, because no one's trying to take new IP and make it R-rated.
Well, it just means that one day somebody will.
The Protege just came out with Maggie Q.
So I'm going tomorrow because I love those.
And it's okay. I didn't love it, but it's like, it was so fun to watch like a whole, like a completely blank slate, rated R. It got to be sexy. Michael Keaton, fucking 70 years old today, was still sexy and badass. And like, even though it could have been better, it was like, it was exciting to see an R-rated action movie like that with big names that it wasn't from an existing property.
Mm-hmm. And with like a lead that's unorthodox. They would normally like a cast an Asian woman in her I think Maggie's in her 40s, but so it's like, that's badass. We don't get those chances anymore because everything has to make such and such amount of dollars, and we're just like, can we just go in and like drop a movie that makes $15-20 million and call it a day? If it's, people will see it. Like I feel like everyone's chasing that bottom dollar all the time, and we end up sort of pigeonholing ourselves into like this small box,
which is a shame because I feel like Mahershala Ali's Blade is going to be very good, but like, it was such a point of contention and conversation of if it would be R or PG-13, and they haven't really said, but they also like kind of did when Kevin had an interview where he was like, well, I think Deadpool 3 is the only R-rated movie we're interested in doing right now.
Yeah.
And it's like, because once you get into that R territory, you don't only just get things like the sprinkler system with blood and a couple good F-bombs. Like I'm like waiting for the Marvel F-bomb. I feel like I'm always like, they get one in a PG-13 rating, and one of these days, like someone's just gonna do it, and it's gonna be awesome, and we're all gonna be like, oh! I thought it was gonna be Guardians. I really thought Rocket was gonna be like, we're the fucking Guardians of the Galaxy just once.
Yeah.
But no. But you also get like deeper themes. I feel like once you kind of get that R rating, like you can get into some headier stuff, because that like a good R-rated action movie is a Blade or The Matrix or Alien or Terminator that's like, ooh, there's not just violence, there's something behind it too. Like I don't want a nonsensical gore for the sake of gore Blade, but like,
it's still a vampire movie.
I want to see him chop a head off.
Like they get some blood in a vampire movie. Like,
it sucks that, I mean, they basically are not in canon anymore, but the Netflix shows like that Jessica Jones, while it was not rated, was definitely rated R, because Purple Man was doing some stuff. You're like, this is some dicey stuff that you're doing in here. But that's what I want out of some of these. Like I want a couple of them. Like Moon Knight should be R. But
it's we're getting into that interesting space where they're starting to get to their horror and their darker characters and their more serious adult orientated characters. And I'm curious how they're going to handle that, because Moon Knight is a good example of like, you could get into mental health and schizophrenia and violence and
start dealing with suicide, all that stuff. If they ever touch the wheel of Punisher again, that's another guy that like, he has to be R. Like he just has to be.
And we've seen Logan come out and do it. We've seen Deadpool, and I feel like Marvel can spare a little bit of money for an R-rated. Like, you don't have to keep doing this. Put a new brand on it.
I think it's like really the Disney of it all. That's
I do think I agree with that. I think if they were still doing independently, or someone else had taken them, I think we would easily have that. But they got to make that call and like, well, The reason why he can justify Deadpool is like, well, this was dead. It was already before came to us, so we're just absorbing what we had. But they're like, nothing else that we do is going to be that way. I'm like, oh, that's because the people over you are saying we got to sell toys. We got to make a ride here at the Disneyland park. So sorry.
And I can't think of too many franchises. And granted, Marvel's its own beast, but that went R-rated, and then the reboot was PG-13. That was also well received.
That was well received. Yeah, no,
it's gonna be hard.
It's gonna be hard.
People, I feel like people are gonna dislike this movie solely because it's not gonna go as well.
Yeah.
Like I don't have any. I'm sure it's gonna be great. I'm sure I'm gonna enjoy the heck out of it. But I mean, I find it impossible that we will like this movie more than Blade or Blade 2.
Correct.
And well, yes. I mean, people don't like the Spider-Man movies as much as Blade do, but like you can do a good dark PG-13 movie. We brought up Revenge of the Sith, which like has some very dark, brooding moments.
The Dark Knight is PG-13. It doesn't. Yeah. It feels like it's R. Yeah.
So it's there, but we also just described two movies. Granted, one of them also is in the Disney house now, but like, when was the last time Disney made a movie like The Dark Knight, Terrence?
Yeah. I mean, without the Miramax sort of brand existing, they kind of stuck. And they don't have that brand where we can do our adult stuff under this brand.
Like Disney proper is like the darkest movie I can think of that's live action that isn't just like it was sad at the end like Toy Story 3, but is Pirates.
Mm-hmm.
And we just got Jungle Cruise, and I was like, it's missing that Pirates horror. Like it's
lighter, more family oriented, where it's not the dark, ghouly stuff that sort of gets in the sort of horror elements. Yeah, you're correct.
And look, I say all this, but that first Blade trailer is going to drop, and I'm going to be here like it's going to be the greatest thing ever.
Obviously, we're all going to see it together. And
correct.
Lose our damn minds.
I'm going to lose my shit. Yeah.
And by that time, I will have rewatched Blade 2 like 50 times.
I mean, I just watched them all for this podcast, and I'm going to watch them all again for the Blade movie, and it's. And I'm sure in between there,
I was like, my roommate hasn't seen it. I was like, come October when we're doing spooky season, we're watching Blade 2.
So let's see Luke Goss do an elbow drop off of the top of like what is happening. This is amazing.
We just got our director announced for it too. So I am also like, okay, like let's see what we can do.
Because he actually just said in an interview that like he plans to like pay homage to Wesley Snipes. I don't know exactly what that means, but he recognizes what Wesley Snipes did to this role, and they're not going to just push it aside. I don't think that means they're going to do some kind of canon creation thing, but I do think that they will be, acknowledge. They're not going to pretend that those movies don't exist.
Right.
Whether or not I don't necessarily think that means story wise, but in terms of promotion, and they're not like. It's not like they're rebooting something that sucks.
Well, that's the weird thing. Normally, when you do a reboot, it's something that something went wrong somewhere, and they're like, "Hey, this is bad." Now, granted, Blade Trinity did not do well, but for most part, most people don't even refer to Blade Trinity. They only talk about Blade 1 and Blade 2, and those are held in some high regards. People are going to be like, "Why are we doing this again?" Other than the fact just to bring Blade into all of this other stuff.
Well, there's a lot of great reasons to do this. We got to bring him into the MCU. I want some of these cool crossovers. Obviously, Morbius is secretly in the MCU.
I was going to say Morbius
Sony is just keeping it hush hush.
Yeah.
The worst kept secret in Hollywood right now is what's going on with that. Moon Knight, Punisher. I am like, yeah. Let's.
If we put Ghost Rider back on the board, yeah.
Like, I was 19, I think, when Iron Man came out. 17. I was 17.
No, because I was 18 when Iron Man.
You were 18. I was 19. Fine, I'm an old man. I was 19.
Well, I'm dying.
My point is, though, I'm now starting to see tweets and Instagram posts, and I don't use TikTok because I'm old, but I've seen posts of people who are like, man, when I was 10 and saw Iron Man, I'm like, you're creating an audience that is now growing up. And like you did with the Marvel Knights comics, give them something darker now, like reward them for sticking around.
It reminds me of like we sort of do this with hip hop or anything where like the birth sort of started at this point, but that group is starting to grow up with you, so you might just start giving them older stuff as that group continues to age up. Yes, still feed the kids because you want to get new folks on board, but that audience that's been with you all the time, they needed something with a little bit more heft and weight to it to keep them satiated.
So I hope they do it, because obviously like this darker Doctor Strange episode, which there's no great way to thematically tie these in other than being like, look, we're doing horror again. What's old is new again. But it is interesting that this really, I think, has been the first episode that I've seen the most social response to of all 4 of them so far. This has probably been the one that's overwhelmingly like, wow. And I'm like, clearly,
yeah,
let's move in that direction.
It's funny because I had thought up until this episode that no one else was really watching these what ifs, because it's been really quiet in comparison to like Loki or WandaVision or Falcon and Winter Soldier post the episodes on Twitter or on Facebook. You haven't heard that much talking about it until this one, when people are like, Jesus, that was so sad. Multitude of sadness, all of that stuff. I was like, oh, you guys are watching. It's just you until this one didn't feel obligated or invited to say anything.
All 4 episodes, I've only done 1 tweet, and normally, you know, I'm like, especially with WandaVision, I was tweeting like 6 tweets a night. But,
yeah.
But like of all 4 episodes, I only tweeted one thing about Coulson because it's me.
Right.
But so I buy that even like if I'm only tweeting once, yeah, people aren't going to be engaging as much.
And I mean, I think they're hungry for it. I'm seeing not so many. I saw one tweet, let me quantify, of somebody being like, man, this was the craziest stuff in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. And a part of me was like, it's so weird that just like a scene of Green Goblin being like, say the prayer, and Doc Ock's tentacles is enough for like newer MCU fans to be like, what is this?
Yeah, people
and it's like, yeah,
that,
guys, it's time to break the formula a little bit. Like we're seeing it in What If.
I think because of the trailer, a lot of people have been going back to watch the original Spider-Mans, and they're seeing that Spider-Man 2 opening with the tentacles joining him. You're like, what's weird? What is happening right now? I was like, yeah, that's when it was good.
That I mean, it's still good. I have no disrespect.
No, but I mean,
now, but like,
I'm the only person
who
good. Prefers the Tom Hollands to the Toby's, but
I am too.
Okay, well, great.
Yeah, no, I think we're all in this.
I'm a Tom Holland fan.
We'll talk in
I don't even just mean as Spider-Man. I just mean like movies. I like Homecoming is my favorite Spider-Man movie.
I like Far From Home. That's my number one. But
okay.
Yes,
Spider-Verse.
I don't live action. I don't.
In Spider-Man 2.
I don't look with the rose-colored glasses with those Raimi films as much as most people do. Although I do still hold Spider-Man 2 up in a pretty high regard. That first one, I don't.
Yeah. So I'm like, it's time. Let's get it. Let's beach them up a little bit. It's time.
Yeah. I would love to get a little rough and rugged with some of my Marvel stuff. I feel like they don't think that people can differentiate or live in that world. And I feel like we are now all proven that that's not the case.
I think we're seeing it. People really responded to that WandaVision episode we talked about. Even like the darker stuff in Falcon and the Winter Soldier is what people grabbed onto. Loki had a lot of kind of horror beats. Like it used to be baked in the DNA more of a lot of movies. Like horror suddenly kind of started the same way comedy did. I feel like those 2 genres started seeping in, and suddenly you didn't get like a great slasher or a great sex comedy because it was all just sort of in the action movies. And I'm like, well, now it's nowhere. Yeah. Except horror is having an amazing renaissance and comedy is not.
Very true. Yeah. I feel like now the Marvel films sort of act more as the comedy. Like that's where you're getting your comedy from. You're not really getting it from comedy.
That's what I mean. Is like it's become this point. Like this blend, and I'm like, we don't really get an American Pie every summer anymore. Or the last ones, like there was a minute where you had like Game Night, Lockers, Booksmart, Tag. There was a hot minute where I was like, we're back. High school coming of age comedies are back. We're doing it. And then none of those made money.
Yeah, they're like, never mind this.
Except for Tag, which I think made a lot of money. A decent amount of money.
Booksmart's one of my favorite movies of the last.
Booksmart, I love.
It's the best.
Like I love that movie to death. Yeah, it's weird though because I feel like Marvel has earned the cachet to do whatever the hell, like to try new things. Like even if it's not that far out of the norm, Shang-Chi is very different. And the ending of that movie, you're like, what the heck? All right, cool. We're here now. Let's do it.
Oh yeah. I mean, that was another one where I was like, ooh, this is like the breath of fresh air that I didn't just need in Marvel, I needed in film.
Correct.
I was like, I haven't had a like hand-to-hand martial arts movie. Because like even that one, again, like it's been a long time since we've had a Bruce Lee movie. It's been a long time since we've had a straight Jackie Chan movie. It's been a long time since Jet Li, The One. Like that was another one where The Matrix kind of this anime explosion took that for a while, and we did get it in your Kill Bills and your Aeon Fluxes, and but this was I was like, oh, I miss it. Now, don't just do this here. Go make a bunch of other awesome. Like, why wasn't Mortal Kombat this good? This should have been like Mortal Kombat should have been an R-rated Shang-Chi movie.
Yeah.
What are you doing, guys? New Line used to be about this life.
They did. They did.
Well, guys, I think that is our episode. I hope you enjoyed listening. Leave us a comment. Let us know the last great comedy you saw so that I can watch it. I don't care if it's streaming or not. I do still need to see Plan B. I need to see Spontaneous. There's a list. I just, we gotta get these numbers up though.
Spontaneous is the hardest I've cried of any movie in 2020. So I don't know if I'd really call it a comedy, but Plan B is really great and funny.
Okay, great.
Nice.
So yeah, let us know. Of course, I said horror is having their renaissance, but I still want more good horror too. Give me all of them.
I want everything.
Yeah,
give
right.
us just a lot of movies all the time.
Yep, that's what I want.
I just want to feel the way I felt when I was 12. Why do you think I have an N64 shirt and this giant Krang next to me? Give it all to me. And then, of course, subscribe and follow us at Hollywood ADI on Instagram and Twitter. I'm at, as always, Blake. Jamie's at Jamie Cinematics, and Terrence is at Terrence Tatum. And, of course, you can listen to the Hollywood Already Did Its regular podcast, which will, as this goes up, have the Shang-Chi episode, and then we'll probably go radio silent because I don't think anything
Until
comes
Halloween.
out.
Yeah, until October comes.
So enjoy those old episodes. You can also listen to How Do You Figure, my action figure podcast. Terrence has all the trailer reactions and other movie reviews on our channel, and Jamie is on the Phase Zero podcast at comicbook.com, where you can also read the rest of her work. And we will see everybody later.
Bye.
Later.